Hello, dear friends of fairy tales. Time for another story in English. My name is Jadwiga. Welcome to my channel. Today I've chosen a story which is originally from Italy, but it's playing in Spain and Armenia. And it reminds me very much to The Water of Life, the story by the Grimm brothers, and The Sleeping Beauty. But listen yourself. Once upon a time, there was a king in Spain. His name was Maximilian. And he had three sons. The eldest's name was Hans, the second's name Friedrich, and the third one's Andreas. So this is actually how the story tells us. It's not my creation. And this king was blind. They called all the doctors in the world, but no doctor could heal the blindness of that king. Now, the magicians had to come and do their work, but none of them had any success. Only one of them stepped forward to the king and said, "I know your blindness, King Maximilian, and it can only healed by the water which you find in the palace of Queen Marmot." And then he disappeared. And nobody could see him anymore. And nobody had known him. So who was that? And where is that palace of Queen Marmot? One of the servants said, "I think he came from Armenia. I have heard something like that." So they thought the palace of Queen Marmot must be found in Armenia. And the eldest son, Hans, said, "Well, father, it's my duty. I will go and get this water for you." And the father blessed him, gave him everything he needs for a long travel. Hans went on a ship. And the first station after 3 days on the ocean was an island called Bura, where the captain said, "Well, you have 2 hours time to walk around the island, but in 2 hours we will leave, so you have to be here." "Sure, sure," said Hans, and he walked around the island, and there was a palace, a crystal palace that was so attractive that he took a closer look. And surprise, surprise, there was a beautiful young woman. And surprise, surprise, they fell in love. Now, the ship left without him. And after 3 months had passed, the king had said, "Well, in 3 months, I want you to be back here." After 3 months had passed and Hans had not returned, the second brother, Friedrich, said, "Now it's up to me to look for my brother and to look for the water for your eyes." The king blessed him, gave him everything he needs for a long travel, and the same happened. They came to that island. The captain said, "You have half a day, but you have to be back in time, otherwise I will leave without you." "Yeah, sure, no problem." So when Friedrich walked across the island, of course he saw that crystal palace and he met his brother and they were so happy. And Friedrich said, what are you doing here? We thought you were dead." "Oh, no," said Hans. "No, look, I have a wonderful, beautiful woman here, and she has a sister, so there is one for you too. Why don't you just stay here?" And so Friedrich did. After these 3 months had gone, the youngest, Andreas, said, "Well, my brothers don't come back. I will go and look where they are, and I will find that water for you." And the king did not want to let him go because he was his youngest and the one he loved most. But Andreas insisted, and he said, "I will go." And so he had to let him go. Of course, Andreas too came to that island and he found his two brothers. And he said, "What are you doing here? We thought you were dead." "Oh no, brother. Look here, it's such a funny life. Come, stay with us." And Andreas said, "Are you crazy? I'm going to find that healing water for our father, and you stay here and just for fun?" And he turned around and went straight back to the ship and reached it long before it would take off. The two brothers were a bit ashamed, but not for long. They forgot about it. So Andreas crossed the ocean and reached Armenia and walked around in Armenia and asked everybody, "Where is the palace of Queen Marmot? Where can I find the palace of Queen Marmot?" But nobody hadn't even heard from her. Everybody shrugged his shoulders, said, "Who's that? No idea. I don't know." And at least somebody said, "Well, there is an old man living up on a high mountain. If he does not know, nobody knows." So Andreas walked up that high mountain, and it was really high and steep. He found that old man and told him what he needed. "Whew, whew," said the old man. "If you really want to do that, that's difficult, that's hard. You have to be very courageous. First, you have to cross a large sea. And this is really dangerous because there are huge polar bears and they try to hit the ships, and sometimes they succeed just to capsize a ship. And if you have reached the island alive, then it becomes really, really sad because this island is called the Island of Tears, and you will very soon see why. Andreas thanked this old man, went down, and, well, looked right for a ship that brought him to that Island of Tears. And the ocean or the sea was really rough, and these polar bears were very aggressive, but they made their way to the island. And when he went on land there stood a guardsman, and he talked to him, but this man stood like a statue. And he called a servant, but he didn't move. And he saw people in the streets. They had just stopped in a movement and doing something. They were all frozen to statues. Just in this moment as this incident, whatever it was, had happened. Now he came to the palace, and the same in the palace. All the servants, the people there, the animals, frozen to statues. He came into a huge, huge room, and there was a wine growing from a golden vase, and that had already covered the whole room and embedded the throne. And other plants had also grown all over around this room, and they had come in from the windows. So it was a kind of a jungle. And there was also an apple tree, and Andreas picked one of the apples because he was hungry. But when he bit into it, he felt his eyesight disappearing, and he was blind. And he thought, oh, when I am blind, how can I find the water of the Queen Marmot? How can I find it blind? And he carefully stepped forward and fell into a hole filled with water. He dove into it, and when he came up and the water had touched his eyes, he could see again. "Ah," he said, "so this must be the water I'm looking for. Now I just have to get out of that well somehow." And there was a rope hanging down. He could grab it and climb up. Now he was tired and he walked the other rooms and eventually came into into a bedroom with a beautiful large bed. And in that bed was the most beautiful girl sleeping with a little smile on her face. Oh, she was so beautiful. He hesitated a little bit, but then get off his white clothes and just lay beside her in that bed. And it was said he spent a sweet night. Next morning, he took a sheet of paper and wrote down, I am Andreas, the youngest son of Maximilian, King of Spain. I was here March 21st in 203. And then he left, took a bottle of that water and an apple too, and went back. Stopped at that island with his brothers. They were glad to see him, but not glad to hear that he had found the water. They were jealous, and they decided to switch his bottle to another one that looked the same and tell their father that they had found the water of life. So when they all the three of them came back, of course, the king and the queen, they were so happy to have all the three of their sons back. And there was such a joy and feast. And the father asked, have you found that water? Yes, said Andreas, I have found it. No, he is lying, said the others. He did not, we did. But I can prove it, said Andreas. He gave an apple to his mother, and his mother became blind. And now he took the water, but this was just ordinary water. It could not help. And now the brothers, they treated their mother with that water so that she could see again. And they also treated the father with the water, and he could see again. And nobody believed Andreas when he said, I have found that water. I made that travel. I did all these risky things. The father became so angry that he called two servants and told them to take his son outside into the woods and kill him. And to prove that they had killed him, he wanted to have his heart. Well, fortunately, the servants did not kill that young man. He promised them that he would never ever return back to that city with their father's palace. And they took the heart of a deer and gave that to the king. Now, everything could have been fine for the two brothers. But 9 months later, Queen Marmot gave birth to a child. And with that birth, all of the island came back to life. And there was such a joy and fun and singing and laughter and dancing. Everybody was so happy. But Queen Marmot asked, how could that happen? Who has come here? And her servant gave her that sheet of paper where said, I, Andreas, youngest son of King Maximilian, have been here. So she wrote a letter to King Maximilian in Spain and said, I want your son Andreas to come here, otherwise I declare war to you. Ooh. When that letter arrived in Spain, they did not know what to do, but Hans said, well, I will go. Oh, no problem. I will go there. And he pretended to be Andreas, but the queen, she was a bit suspicious. She asked him questions. She asked, for example, what was the exact date when you have been here? And this has something changed here in this room? And where have you met me? And of course, he had no answer. And it was obvious that he was lying. So the queen cut his head, not she herself, she had people to do that, and put his head onto a fence post outside the palace. When Hans did not return, Friedrich had to go because there was another letter from Queen Marmot, and she said, I want you to send my son, your son Andreas, and not somebody else. Friedrich saw the head of his brother and turned around. No, no, that was difficult. Because now the king realized that Andreas was innocent, that his elder sons had lied on him. And he said, why did you do that? And Friedrich said, well, it were the women. The women asked us to stay there. And the king was desperate. He said, I have killed my son, the one and only one who has really tried to help me. And he called the servants who had brought him into the forest and said, please show me his grave. Show me where you buried him. Oh, these two men felt very uncomfortable. They had to admit that they had not killed Andreas. But now the king was so happy and said, he's alive, he's alive. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And he made declaration all over the world that Andreas was very, very welcome to come back and that they now knew that he was innocent. Now, Andreas came back to his family. And of course, he went back to the Isle of Joy. It was no longer the island of tears, it was the island of joy now. And as far as I know, they were very happy with each other, Queen Marmot and him. And I don't know how many children there came later. What do you think of that story? The king is blind. What does he not see? What does he not want to see? Could be that he does not see the real character of his two elder sons, that he does not see that they are not good. And it's understandable that a father does not want to see that. Of course not. And now when the second son comes to that island, Friedrich, and the two of them stay there. So this is, do you know that release when you have done something wrong and there is somebody else who has done that too? You are not so guilty anymore because you share it and you are not the only one. And that feels much better than being the only one. Now, when Andreas comes, he confronts them with their shame and guilt. And of course, they don't like that. And when he returns back with the water, they try to wash themselves clean, their guilt that they have simply not done what they had promised, that they had forgotten their father just because of nice women there. So they created another guilt to say, no, it was us. So this intrigue to make them seem innocent and hero, and the real hero would seem to be guilty. This is something we often see in life. Huh? It's not so unusual. Now, it always is a bit cruel when people get their head cut up. And I don't know whether this is in English, but too, but in German we say, "Oh, I have lost my head," or "He was completely headless," which means we are so confused and in such a stress that we could not think clearly anymore. And this means losing one's head. And of course, this Hans was in a confusion and in stress, and he has lost his head. So um, this is not to be understood like really cut off. The water. The water has always to do with emotions. And this dangerous water is confronts us with our deepest desires and our shadows and the thoughts and sides we don't like, but we have to confront them. And this is what Andreas does. The elder brothers don't do that because to this island, everything is clear. There is no storm on the water. They come there quite easily. And at least in the fairy tales and in the real world, the truth comes always to the light. You cannot hide the truth forever. You can try to, you can lie, you can create digital service acts and delete videos and forbid free speech, whatever you can create, but the truth, at the end, the truth comes to the light. Because this is what truth does and has to do, fortunately. And this is what we just see all around the world. It's just starting. And one last thing, you might be surprised that this ship landed in Armenia. And I have watched on Wikipedia, so there was a time when Armenia was really so big that it reached until the Mediterranean Sea. Yeah, I hope you liked this video and thank you for watching and hope to see you next time. Bye.